I flew a medical helicopter for Lakeside Regional Hospital, and I had learned, over 6 years on the job, that the sky never cared what plans people made on the ground. The storm that rolled into Denver that November evening had grounded every flight in and out of the city, mine included, and I found myself standing in the lobby of the Ashwood Hotel with a duffel bag over my shoulder and no idea where I was going to sleep. My name was Jack Bennett, 34 years old, and I had just come off a 16-hour shift that ended with an emergency transport gone sideways because of the weather. I needed 4 walls, a bed, and 8 hours of unconsciousness before I had to be back at the hangar. The woman at the front desk, a young clerk named Priya, gave me an apologetic look before I even asked. "Sir, I'm so sorry. We just gave away our last room about 2 minutes ago. There's a system-wide convention in town, and the storm's got everyone stuck. Every hotel within 20 miles is full." I set my bag down and rubbed my eyes. There has to be something. A cot in the back office. A closet. I don't care. That was when I heard her voice behind me, tight with an urgency that cut through my exhaustion. "Please. I'm not trying to jump the line. I promise, but is there truly nothing? Anything at all?" I turned and saw a woman in a soaked wool coat, dark hair plastered to her forehead, mascara smudged from either rain or tears, maybe both. She had a garment bag draped over one arm, protecting whatever was inside it like it was the last fragile thing in the world. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Priya said again, and I watched the woman's shoulders drop half an inch, which for someone clearly holding herself together by sheer will was as good as collapsing. "I have 11 hours, the woman said, mostly to herself. 11 hours to get to Cedar Falls. My sister's getting married tomorrow at 11 in the morning, and I'm supposed to be walking her down the aisle since our dad passed. And every flight's canceled, and now there's no room to even wait this thing out." Something in the way she said it, flat and disbelieving, like the universe had personally decided to inconvenience her, made me step forward before I'd fully decided to. "I've got a room," I said. "Well, I had a room. I booked online an hour ago before all this happened. I haven't checked in yet." Priya glanced at her screen. "Mr. Bennett, you're right. You do have a reservation. Room 411. One of our last king suites. I apologize. With everything happening tonight, I hadn't pulled it up." The woman turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Hope mixed with the exhausted wariness of someone who'd had a hard night. "I couldn't possibly ask you to give up your room." "I'm not giving it up," I said. "I'm offering to split it. There's a pull-out couch in most of these suites. I've stayed here before for hospital training. You take the bed, I'll take the couch, and in the morning you go be your sister's maid of honor. That's the deal, no funny business. I've got scrubs in my bag and a whole night of paperwork to catch up on anyway." She studied me for a long moment, the way people do when they're trying to calculate whether a stranger's kindness is a trap.
"You're serious?"
"I fly a helicopter for a living. I've made worse decisions on less sleep." I gave her the kind of smile I used on frightened patients, calm, steady, nothing to be afraid of here. "Name's Jack." "Claire," she said. "Claire Whitfield. And if you're lying about the couch thing, I want you to know I have pepper spray and I'm not afraid to use it." Duly noted, Priya, visibly relieved that the standoff had resolved itself, without her having to turn anyone, out into the storm, processed the keycards, and Claire and I rode the elevator up together in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. She kept glancing at the garment bag, like it might disintegrate if she stopped watching it. "Bridesmaid dress?" I asked. "Maid of honor dress. My sister Emma picked it out herself. Sage green. Apparently it's this year's wedding color everyone's obsessed with." She laughed, short and tired. "I don't even care what color it is. I just need to get there." Inside the room, I did exactly what I'd promised. Pulled out the couch bed, gave her the room with the actual mattress, and busied myself checking flight boards on my phone while she disappeared into the bathroom to peel off her wet clothes. When she came back out in a hotel robe, hair damp, some of the frantic energy had drained out of her, replaced by something heavier. "Every flight out is canceled until at least 6 a.m., she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And even then, Cedar Falls doesn't have a commercial airport. I'd have to fly into Grand Junction and then drive 2 hours. The wedding's at 11. I don't think the math works. What time does the ceremony actually start exactly?" 11 sharp. "Emma's been planning this for a year. She doesn't do things halfway." Claire pulled her knees up to her chest. "Our mom's already there. She flew out 3 days ago. It's just me who got stuck handling one more work crisis before I could leave. And now the weather's punishing me for it." I didn't say anything right away. I was doing math of my own, the kind I did every time a call came in and I had to figure out fuel, weather windows, and whether a flight was possible or just wishful thinking. "What's the address in Cedar Falls?" I asked. "Why?" "Humor me." She gave it to me, and I pulled up the weather radar, cross-referencing it against Lakeside Regional's service radius and refueling stops. Cedar Falls sat almost exactly at the edge of our hospital's flight coverage, which meant, in theory, if the storm cell broke by early morning the way the forecasters were predicting, there was a narrow window where a medevac transport heading that direction for a routine patient transfer could, hypothetically, have room for one more passenger. There's a patient transfer scheduled out to Meadowbrook Regional tomorrow morning, I said slowly. 6 a.m., weather permitting. Meadowbrook's 18 miles from Cedar Falls. If the storm clears like they're saying, and if my supervisor signs off, and that's a lot of ifs, I could maybe get you close enough that a taxi or rideshare finishes the job in 20 minutes. Claire's eyes went wide, then guarded, like she was afraid to let herself believe it. You'd really do that? Take a total stranger on a medical flight for your sister's wedding? Except she's not even your sister? I'm already flying that route. You'd just be extra cargo. I'll have to run it by dispatch. But hospital transport flights have had ride-alongs before for family. Members of patients, there's precedent. I can't promise anything, but I'm not going to just let you sit here doing math that doesn't work when there might be a version that does. She was quiet for a moment and then, unexpectedly, she started to cry, not the dramatic kind, just quiet tears that she wiped away almost angrily, like she resented her own body for betraying her exhaustion. I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart in front of strangers. It's just been a year. Our dad died in March. Emma and I haven't always been close. We're 8 years apart and grew up kind of separately. But planning this wedding brought us back together in a way I didn't expect. And I promised her I'd be there no matter what, and I meant it. You'll be there, I said, with more confidence than I probably had any right to. Get some sleep. I'll call dispatch first thing. I didn't sleep much myself, running scenarios in my head, calculating fuel loads and weather margins, the way I always did before a difficult flight. Around 4 a.m., I got up and called Diane, my flight coordinator, laying out the situation. She was skeptical at first. Hospital policy about non-medical passengers was strict for good reason, liability being what it was, but when I explained the timeline, and when Diane, who had gotten married herself only 2 years earlier, softened at the mention of a sister needing a maid of honor, she said she'd see what she could arrange, provided the storm cleared and the transfer went ahead as planned. She called back at 5:15. Weather was clearing faster than expected. The patient transfer was a go, and provided Claire signed a passenger waiver and stayed exactly where instructed, she could ride along as space allowed. I woke Claire up with the best news I could have delivered. She looked at me across the room, hair still messy from sleep, and for a second didn't seem to understand what I was saying. And then she did, and she was up and moving, pulling on clothes, hands shaking with the kind of hope that's almost more disorienting than despair. The flight out to Lakeside Regional's hangar was tense and quiet, both of us watching the sky lighten from black to gray to a pale, washed-out morning blue. Diane met us at the helipad, ran through the safety briefing with Claire in about 90 seconds flat, professional and brisk, and then we were airborne, the city shrinking below us, the storm clouds retreating east like they'd never had any business being there in the first place. Claire sat in the jump seat, garment bag clutched to her chest, watching the landscape unfold beneath us, mountains catching the early light, snow still clinging to the peaks even though it was only November. She didn't say much during the flight. Communication wasn't easy over the rotor noise anyway, but every so often she'd glance over at me and mouth something that looked like thank you, and I'd nod, focused on the instruments. On the fuel gauge, on getting this exactly right, we touched down at Meadowbrook Regional a few minutes after 7. I helped Claire off the helicopter, and she stood there for a second on the tarmac, blinking in the sunlight like she couldn't quite believe she'd made it this far. There's a rideshare waiting, I said, checking my phone. I called ahead. Meadowbrook's got a service that partners with the hospital for patient families. 20 minutes to Cedar Falls. You'll have almost 3 hours before the ceremony. She hugged me then, fast and fierce, garment bag crushed between us, and pulled back with tears in her eyes that weren't from exhaustion this time. I don't know how to thank you. You gave up your room, your morning, probably broke about 6 rules. 4, maybe 5, I said. Go get married. Go watch your sister get married. She laughed, a real laugh this time, bright and unguarded, and something in my chest shifted in a way I didn't examine too closely. Given that I had a patient transfer to finish and she had a car waiting. Can I ask you something? She said, already backing toward the waiting sedan. When this is over, when the wedding's done and the dust settles, can I buy you a drink? Properly, not at 2 a.m. in a hotel lobby during a crisis? I'd like that, I said, and I meant it more than the casual words let on. She climbed into the car, rolled down the window, and called out her number, which I typed into my phone with fingers that weren't quite steady, and then the car pulled away, taking her toward Cedar Falls and her sister. and a wedding I'd never see but had somehow become part of anyway. I flew back to Lakeside Regional that afternoon, and 3 days later, Claire called, not texted, called, and told me the ceremony had been beautiful. That Emma had cried when she found out how her sister had gotten there. That she'd told the whole reception about the pilot who'd given up his room and his morning for a stranger. She asked if I was free that weekend. I told her I'd clear my schedule around any transport flights, and I meant it. We met at a small bar downtown, and this time there was no storm outside. No crisis pulling either of us in different directions. Just two people who'd been thrown together by chance and bad weather, and had decided, independently and then together, that they didn't want it to end there. Claire told me more about her father, about the complicated years with her sister, about the job in marketing that she was starting to think she'd outgrown. I told her about 6 years of medevac flights, about the calls that haunted me and the ones that reminded me why I did the job at all. It wasn't a fairy tale, not exactly. We were both careful people who'd been burned before, both a little slow to trust something that had started so strangely. But 6 months later, when Claire's lease ended, she didn't look for a new apartment right away. And somewhere in the space of those unhurried months, careful conversations turned into something neither of us wanted to rush past. She kept the sage green dress from the wedding hanging in her closet, said she never wanted to get rid of it, since it was the reason she'd learned exactly what kind of man would give up his last room in a storm for a stranger who needed it more. I still fly the same helicopter for the same hospital, still take the calls nobody else wants at 3 a.m. But now there's someone waiting at the hangar sometimes when I land. Someone who understands exactly what it means when the radio goes quiet and the weather clears just enough to make the impossible flight possible. Some nights, when Claire falls asleep on the couch, we still keep in our own apartment. The same kind of pull-out couch from a hotel room that started it all. I think about how close it came to not happening at all. One room, one key, one storm, and how the whole shape of my life changed because a woman needed 11 hours and I happened to be standing in the right lobby at the right moment with nothing to offer but a couch and the stubborn belief that some things are worth bending the rules for.